6:14 a.m., February 3, 2026. A residential street in Cedar Rapids, Iowa. 27 FBI tactical agents moved across frozen lawns toward a two-story colonial. Identical formations were unfolding in 14 cities at the same minute. Phoenix, Tampa, Charlotte, Albuquerque, Memphis, Spokane, Lansing. The agents at the Cedar Rapids door carried a federal warrant naming a licensed certified nurse midwife, age 46, who, according to Medicaid billing records, had personally delivered 94 newborns in October 2025 alone. Not one of those babies existed. The breach charge cracked the storm door. Inside, the midwife was standing in her kitchen, fully dressed, holding a cup of coffee. She had been waiting since 4:30 a.m. A neighbor's dog had started barking 40 minutes earlier, and she had understood immediately what that meant. On the dining table sat a paper folder labeled Case Files. Inside the folder, 140 manufactured prenatal charts, each one printed within the last 72 hours. She had been planning to burn them in the backyard fire pit at sunrise. The agents arrived 26 minutes too early. That folder became the spine of the prosecution. The operation had a code name: NURSERY ECHO. Joint Task Force, FBI Healthcare Fraud Unit, the Office of Inspector General at Health and Human Services, and Internal Revenue Service Criminal Investigation. Sealed indictment. 16 months under court seal, from October 2024 through the unsealing on February 3, 2026. By the time the ram hit the door in Cedar Rapids, federal prosecutors had built a case touching 29 OBGYN practices and 6 midwife-run birthing centers across 11 states. Total fraudulent billing, $310 million. Total fictitious newborns invoiced to Medicaid and private insurers, 1,400. Total identity theft victims, alive and unaware, roughly 2,800 mothers and 1,400 infants who were never born. 340 of those non-existent infants already had credit lines opened in their names before they were old enough, on paper, to walk. This is the reconstruction of how a network of clean clinics, glowing reviews, and one quiet consulting firm built the largest synthetic birth fraud in American history, and how a single Medicaid auditor in Iowa refused to let one number go. The auditor's name was Dana Reston, State of Iowa, Department of Human Services, Program Integrity Division. 12 years at the desk. On October 14, 2025, at roughly 9:40 in the morning, she pulled a routine variance report on midwife-billed deliveries in eastern Iowa for the prior quarter. One provider number flagged, 94 deliveries, one midwife, October, a single calendar month. The state average for an independent certified nurse midwife was between 4 and 7 deliveries per month. The busiest hospital-affiliated midwife in Iowa had logged 22 in her best month on record. 94 was not high. 94 was physiologically impossible. A human midwife working 24 hours a day for 31 straight days could not attend 94 births alone, and Medicaid records showed this provider as the sole attending on every single one. Reston pulled the underlying claims. The babies had names, APGAR scores, birth weights, times of delivery, distributed evenly across the month, maternal Medicaid IDs, pediatric follow-up codes. Everything looked correct on its face. Nothing pinged the automated fraud detection system because every individual claim was internally consistent. She filed an internal anomaly report at 11:08 a.m. and went to lunch. The report was killed within 48 hours. A consulting firm based in suburban Maryland, retained by the birthing center under a compliance support contract, had a standing relationship with Iowa's Medicaid Managed Care Organization. The firm's lead representative, a former state Medicaid fraud investigator with 17 years of credibility inside the agency, placed 3 phone calls. By Friday afternoon, the anomaly report had been reclassified as a documentation density artifact caused by retroactive batch billing for prior quarter home visit deliveries. Reston was told the matter was closed. She did not believe it. She did not say so. She made a copy of the report on a personal flash drive and walked out at 5. What Reston did not know that afternoon was that auditors in Tennessee, New Mexico, and Michigan had filed nearly identical anomaly reports in the previous 9 months. Each one had been talked down by the same consulting firm. Each auditor had been told the same explanation. Each report had been quietly closed. The firm was called Caldwell Vance Health Compliance Group. It had been founded in March 2022. Its founder, Marcus Caldwell, age 58, had spent 2 decades as a fraud investigator inside a state Medicaid program before going private. He knew exactly which thresholds triggered automated review. He knew exactly which language diffused human review. And he had built a business that, on paper, helped small clinics navigate complex billing rules. In practice, Caldwell Vance was the operation's backbone. One detail matters most. The patients were real. Their identities were real. They had never set foot in any of the clinics. Between 2022 and 2024, 4 major hospital systems operating across the southeastern and midwestern United States suffered separate data breaches affecting maternity ward records. The breaches received minor regional press coverage. Combined, they exposed identifying information for roughly 12,000 women who had given birth at participating hospitals. Names, dates of birth, social security numbers, insurance policy data, prior pregnancy history. A subset of that data, approximately 2,800 profiles selected for clean Medicaid eligibility, and no recent claim activity, was purchased on a forum hosted on a Russian-language darknet marketplace in late 2023. The buyer paid in Monero. The buyer's wallet, traced 18 months later by an IRSCI cyber forensic team, resolved through 3 mixers to an exchange account registered to a Shell LLC in Wyoming. The Shell LLC's registered agent had also incorporated Caldwell Vance Health Compliance Group. That single thread, 18 months of crypto tracing, was what eventually allowed federal prosecutors to charge Caldwell as the architect, not just an enabler. But on October 14th, 2025, none of that was visible yet. There was only Dana Reston, a flash drive, and a number she could not unsee. 6 days later, on October 20th, she drove to Des Moines and walked into the FBI field office without an appointment. She asked to speak with someone in healthcare fraud. The duty agent was Special Agent Lauren Pock, 4 years in the unit. Pa listened for 41 minutes, took the flash drive, and called her supervisor before Reston had reached her car in the parking lot. The case was opened that afternoon under preliminary file designation FH-2 6-1041. Within 10 days, the file was elevated to a joint task force. By November 5, 2025, agents from FBI, HHS-OIG, and IRS-CI were meeting in a windowless conference room in Washington, comparing data across states. The Tennessee anomaly, the New Mexico anomaly, the Michigan anomaly, Iowa. All 4 had named different small midwifery practices. All 4 had been closed by interventions from the same Maryland consulting firm. Special Agent Pack ran the Iowa angle. The lead analyst on the federal side was Inspector General Investigator Renee Salgado, 22 years at HHS-OIG, who had run the Medicare Strike Force takedowns of 2017 and 2018. Salgado sat with the comparative data for 3 days. Then she said one sentence in the meeting on November 8th. "This is not a billing pattern. This is a corporation." She was right, but she was also wrong about the scale. I spent hours going through the unsealed indictment and the supporting affidavits, and one detail kept nagging at me. The fictitious infants had pediatrician visits, real billing codes, real CPT entries, 6-week well baby checks, 2-month immunizations, hearing screen follow-ups. Each one time-stamped, each one billed, each one paid. Somebody, somewhere, was generating not just birth records, but a continuous medical life for children who had never drawn a breath. That meant providers downstream were either complicit, or more disturbingly, fooled by paperwork good enough to clear them. The investigation's first real obstacle came in early December 2025. The task force had identified the network's structure but had no insider testimony. No recorded statements, no flipped witness. The clinics were small. The staff at each location was tight, often family-related. Surveillance produced nothing actionable. The CPAs who handled the books were located out of state and communicated almost exclusively through Caldwell Vance. For 5 weeks, the case did not move. Then on January 9, 2026, an office manager at a small OB/GYN practice in Asheville, North Carolina, age 34, the daughter of one of the indicted physicians, drove to a Greenville, South Carolina FBI satellite office on a Saturday morning and asked to surrender. She had been preparing to do this for 2 months. Her testimony, given over 11 days under proffer agreement, opened the entire architecture. She described how it worked. Caldwell Vance assigned each participating clinic a caseload of stolen identities every quarter. The clinic's billing staff entered prenatal visits, ultrasounds, and lab work spread across the appropriate gestational timeline, sometimes 36 weeks of fabricated prenatal care for a single fictitious pregnancy. The delivery was billed by a midwife or attending physician within the network. Within 72 hours of the fake birth, a forged birth registration packet was submitted to a state vital records office through an electronic provider portal. 6 of the participating birthing centers had legitimate provider credentials for those portals. Once a state registered the birth, a Social Security number was issued automatically through the Enumeration at Birth program, the federal system that allows hospitals to request SSNs for newborns through the same forms used for birth certificates. That process is largely automated. It does not verify that the infant exists. The SSN, once issued, was the asset. Some SSNs were simply held. The infant existed only as a Medicaid beneficiary, generating well baby billing for the next 36 months, and then, conveniently, moving out of state before kindergarten enrollment ever forced a real child into a real classroom. 340 SSNs went a different direction. They were sold separately, downstream, to synthetic identity fraud rings that opened credit cards, auto loans, and small business accounts using the infant SSN paired with adult-supplied names and addresses. By the time Nursery ECHO unsealed, those 340 synthetic identities had generated an additional estimated $47 million in unrelated credit fraud, losses that will never be fully recovered. Because by federal law, a child's credit cannot be frozen until a parent applies, and there are no parents to apply. Hit subscribe before the next part. Once you see how the consulting firm masked 4 separate state audits, you will not look at small clinic billing the same way again. The cooperating office manager handed agents one more thing: a phone. Her father's phone, taken from his home office without his knowledge during a Christmas visit. On it, agents recovered roughly 1,900 encrypted messages between the father and a contact, saved as MC Advisory. MC Advisory was Marcus Caldwell. The messages, decrypted under warrant, included direct instructions on how to smooth the Iowa audit 2 days after Reston filed her report. They also included a line that became the most cited sentence in the federal complaint. Iowa is handled. Push 2 more deliveries through the Cedar Rapids node before quarter close. That sentence was sent at 4:14 p.m. on October 16, 2025. It is the moment the case turned from anomaly into conspiracy. By the second week of January, the task force had moved into the surveillance and undercover phase. 3 FBI agents were inserted into pre-existing investigations, posing as physicians referred to Caldwell Vance for compliance onboarding. Each agent wore audio. Over 14 meetings across 4 states, Caldwell or his deputies described, in coded but unmistakable language, the synthetic patient pipeline. They quoted prices. They quoted volumes. They warned the undercover physicians not to deviate from quarterly load assignments. The surprising thing about this case is not the scale. It is how quiet it was. The fraud generated $310 million over 4 years, spread across 35 locations. That is roughly $2.2 million per location per year. Inside the noise of American healthcare billing, that figure does not stand out. A single high-volume cardiology practice in a major city can bill more in a quarter. The network had engineered itself to live below the threshold of suspicion at every individual node, because Caldwell, having spent 17 years inside a Medicaid program, knew exactly where that threshold sat. Then on January 22, 2026, the operation almost collapsed. A clerk at the Maryland Department of Assessments and Taxation, processing a routine annual filing for one of Caldwell Vance's shell entities, mistakenly auto-flagged the account because of a duplicated EIN entry. The flag generated an automated email to the entity's registered address. Caldwell received the email. He understood immediately that something on the corporate paperwork side was being looked at. He did not know by whom. Within 48 hours, Caldwell booked a one-way commercial flight from Dulles to Lisbon, departing on the evening of January 25th. He listed the trip as a compliance conference in his firm's internal calendar. He told his wife it was a 4-day business trip. He boarded with 2 carry-on suitcases and a laptop. He did not return. Federal prosecutors learned of the departure on January 27th when an HHS-OIG analyst pulled passenger manifests as part of pre-takedown logistical planning. The takedown was scheduled for February 3rd. They had 8 days. They could either accelerate the operation and risk losing the smaller targets who were not yet under full surveillance, or stay on schedule and accept that their primary architect was already gone. Salgado made the call. Stay on schedule. Take everyone reachable. Pursue Caldwell separately through extradition. It was the right call. It also meant the man at the center of the network would spend 2 months in a rented apartment in the Alfama district of Lisbon, while the rest of his organization was being booked into federal holding facilities across 11 states. Here is the take that will probably get pushback. Caldwell's flight was not a failure of federal investigation. It was a failure of an interagency notification protocol that, in 2026, still does not automatically alert federal task forces when a sealed target's shell entities trigger state-level administrative flags. The Maryland clerk did her job correctly. The flag worked exactly as designed. There was simply no pipe connecting that flag to the FBI agents in a Washington conference room 4 blocks from the Maryland line. That gap exists today in dozens of states, and it will be exploited again. Then came February 3rd. The takedown began at 6 a.m. Eastern. Synchronized across 4 time zones, 241 federal agents, supported by state and local law enforcement, executed 83 arrest warrants and 112 search warrants simultaneously. Cedar Rapids, Asheville, Tampa, Charlotte, Lansing, Memphis, Albuquerque, Phoenix, Reno, Spokane, Tulsa, Lexington, Birmingham, Greensboro. The Cedar Rapids midwife was the first arrest logged at 6:18 a.m. Central. By 11 a.m. Eastern, all 83 named defendants were in custody. 6 licensed physicians, 11 certified nurse midwives, 14 office managers and billing supervisors, 7 CPAs, 23 administrative and clerical staff, 22 associated individuals charged on related counts including identity theft, wire fraud, and aggravated identity theft. Inside the Charlotte clinic, agents recovered 460 pre-printed prenatal charts in a locked storage room behind the autoclave. Inside the Tampa Birthing Center, 71 infant footprint cards, blank, never used, intended to be filled in retroactively. Inside the Asheville practice, an entire filing cabinet of pediatric well baby visit forms, signed and dated for visits that had never occurred, awaiting submission. In Lansing, a physician barricaded himself in a back office for 40 minutes before opening the door. He had been attempting to delete patient management software remotely. The deletion failed. Federal forensic technicians later recovered the full database, including, in one folder, a spreadsheet labeled Q4 Load, listing 216 identity profiles assigned to that single practice for the 4th quarter of 2025. Put yourself in Special Agent Pock's position for a moment. You started this case because one auditor in Iowa would not stop staring at one number. Now, 3.5 months later, you are standing in a Cedar Rapids dining room, watching evidence technicians photograph a paper folder that a midwife was 26 minutes away from burning. The entire prosecution rests, in part, on what is in that folder. If she had woken up at 4 a.m. instead of 4:30, the network's most complete client roster would be ash. That is the margin federal cases are built on. The aftermath unfolded across the next 11 weeks. Of the 83 indicted, 61 have entered guilty pleas as of mid-April 2026. Cooperation agreements have produced testimony against the remaining defendants and, critically, against 3 additional state-level Medicaid administrators who took payments from Caldwell Vance between 2023 and 2025 in exchange for routing audit anomalies into the consulting firm's compliance review pipeline. Those 3 administrators were indicted under separate sealed proceedings on March 18th and unsealed on April 2nd. Marcus Caldwell was located in Lisbon on March 11th by a joint Interpol and FBI legal attaché operation working through Portuguese judicial police. He was arrested in a cafe 2 blocks from his rented apartment while reading an English-language newspaper. He did not resist. He requested a lawyer in English and said nothing else. Portuguese authorities approved provisional extradition on April 14th. He arrived at Dulles on April 19th and was arraigned in the Eastern District of Virginia the following morning. He has entered a not guilty plea on all 41 counts, including conspiracy to commit healthcare fraud, conspiracy to commit identity theft, and aggravated identity theft involving more than 1,000 victims. The Department of Justice has recovered approximately $142 million through asset seizure, frozen accounts, and forfeiture of real property held by shell entities. Roughly $168 million remains unrecovered. A portion of that is believed to be held in cryptocurrency wallets whose private keys are known only to Caldwell. Investigators believe a smaller portion, somewhere between $15 and $30 million, was distributed to lower-tier participants and spent. It will not come back. The 340 children who do not exist but whose Social Security numbers have been used to open credit lines are now the subject of a separate civil remediation process administered by the Federal Trade Commission and the Social Security Administration. Those SSNs are being permanently flagged and retired. The synthetic identities built on top of them are being unwound bank by bank, lender by lender. That process is expected to take 3 to 4 years. 2 participants, both lower-level billing staff, were not charged and remain identified only as cooperating witnesses in the indictment. They will not be named publicly. One of them, according to court filings, is the person who first quietly contacted federal investigators in August 2025, 2 months before Dana Reston ever pulled her variance report, and provided the initial frame that made the Iowa anomaly recognizable when it landed. That person has not given an interview. Their name is sealed. The investigation that bears the code name NURSERY ECHO began, in some real sense, with them. Reston returned to her desk in Des Moines on February 4th and processed routine claims that morning. She has declined all media requests. A colleague, speaking anonymously to a regional newspaper, said she put the flash drive she copied that October afternoon into a small fireproof box in her office and has not opened it since. The network is dismantled. 83 indictments. $142 million recovered. 6 physicians who took an oath now facing decades in federal prison. 1,400 children who never existed have been removed from federal databases. 2,800 women who were never patients are being notified, 1 letter at a time, that their identities were used to bill pregnancies they never had. The data breaches that fed the network have not been fully closed. The hospital systems have not been compelled, under current federal law, to publicly disclose which of their patients are at continued risk. The darknet marketplace that hosted the original 2023 sale is still operational, under different administrators, on a different mirror. The $47 million in synthetic identity credit fraud generated downstream of the 340 unborn children will be absorbed by lenders, written off, and folded into next year's interest rates. The infrastructure that made NURSERY ECHO possible has not been dismantled. Only one network using it has. Somewhere, right now, a state Medicaid auditor is looking at a number that does not fit. What happens next depends on whether anyone listens.